get you where you want to go. I think it means global positioning, something like that. Point is, it gets you where you want to go, right? Okay, so how many of you have ever used a GPS on an iPhone? Okay, and what happens when that battery goes flat? You get upset, right? You get lost. We are all so trustful of that one gadget, we don't even look out the window anymore when we're on our way somewhere. And when that voice, you know what happens when you make a wrong turn? When you miss the street, what happens? What does it say? What's that? Recalculate. Recalculate. Do any of you find that annoying? But you listen to it, and you immediately turn around and find your focus point. Okay, so that voice tells us where we're going, how we need to get there. We believe it unconditionally. Our instinct tells us to obey that voice sounding out of that little gadget. We put it on our dashboard, on our iPhone, and we obey it. Now, the GPS is more than a technological gadget, and I'm not doing a commercial for any particular company. We let it become a trusted friend, guiding us in different directions on a daily basis. It's almost instinctive. We put it in our cars when we leave home, all this technology in one place, but there's one kind of technology, one kind of system, one kind of GPS that's really old. Doesn't need to be updated at all. It gives the passenger perfect directions. It tells you where you're going and how you're going to get there. It even tells you what's going to happen if you don't arrive. Most of all, this application is free. It only requires you to say, La ilaha illallah. So why are we lost? Why, with such perfect directions, do we still seem to be getting lost here? It tells us more about recalculating than any positioning system. So why are 75% of this nation so suspicious about us? Why are we going? Why are they concerned about where we are going and what we intend to do? Every time we come back from traveling, how many of you get stopped? How many of you get questioned? How many of you get your computers taken away and the contents of your computers downloaded? And why are lawmakers trying to stop something called Islamic law in this country when no one's even trying to institute it here? As much as Muslims are trying to move forward, there's this force field that keeps pushing us backwards. Now, some of us will say, well, it's not our fault. We were blamed for something we didn't do. We are powerless to change these big programs, government programs, which include being profiled, questioned, investigated, and harassed. We don't know how to deal with these surveillance issues. We couldn't help the undocumented immigrants from being detained, even though these undocumented immigrants, all those who were Muslims, were held double the amount of time than people from other places and countries and religions. How many of you did not help those who were detained even though they were innocent, helpless, and some of them even stateless? How many of you told yourself that it was too dangerous to donate to Muslim organizations, forcing them to cut programs that were vital to your human rights? Some did donate to our brothers convicted in the prosecution for the Holy Land Foundation. Some of these brothers who were handed a term that could last them the rest of their lives because they dedicated all of their lives to saving others, dedicated helping people, a people who most of the world had conveniently forgotten. How many of you tell yourselves we did everything we could? Because if this is what you're saying, you're being dishonest with yourself. You're being dishonest to your conscience, and worst of all, to Allah. You might not even know it. You might not even know it because you've become disconnected to your spiritual GPS, foreseeing the turn that makes you miscalculating the burden of this deen, or that part that says that you will only change your condition when you change yourselves. So recalculate and pay attention to the voice that promises to be with you when you remember him. Stop leaving the original GPS on a shelf, put it back in your hands and head, and find your direction. This GPS is so perfect that you will find a way to be a good American, but an excellent Muslim. Your children won't have to go to websites to tell them what's the best way to sacrifice for Allah. It will guide you to making more of your masjid than the quick runs on Fridays. Don't say you don't have enough time, because you have exactly the same number of hours per day given to the Prophet ﷺ, the same amount of time given to Abu Bakr, Ibn Taymiyyah, Sheikh Ahmed Yaqeen, Azam, Shukri Abu Bakr, and the rest of our brothers serving time while we wasted our time going in the wrong direction. Now let's recalculate on what happened after 9/11, which we can't do unless we remember what happened before 9/11. Had we followed our spiritual GPS prior to the tragedy, then maybe we wouldn't have been blamed for it. You see, moral action is what you do to enjoin what is good and forbid what is evil, and no one will be confused about who you are, the goodness of what you represent, and the gifts of peace that Islam has to offer. 20 years from now, you will be disappointed by the things you didn't do than by the ones that you did. I say to myself, I should have done more to prepare myself for the people that I am blessed to help through the Mass Immigration Justice Clinic now. The adjustment we started doing because of the immigration problems and the difficulty that Muslims were having getting their statuses adjusted, getting their asylums completed, being taken out of removal. We are the first Muslim MAS, the first Muslim organization to be accredited by the Department of Homeland Security and Department of Justice to represent immigrants in a court of law. Okay. So, the adjustment of statuses, when we started doing it, that was easy. That was easy enough. Those affected by the Patriot Act, like profiling, no-fly lists, illegal surveillance, those have all been manageable. We have gotten more than 100 people, more than 100, I think 115 names taken off of the no-fly list. These things didn't bother me, but it's the other kind of cases that bothered me, cases that involved people like a woman, her name is Noura. Noura was sold to a man from the Gulf when she was 13. By the time she was 18, she escaped. She had been tortured so much that she will never be able to have a normal life. We filed for political asylum. She was the first case I represented before an immigrant judge on protection against honor killing, and we won. I wasn't ready for the next case, which was Khawla. Most of her family was killed by Saddam, and the rest were killed after America evaded Iraq, and she was brought here as a refugee, okay, but dumped after the agency gave her 2 months of rent, a couple of weeks' worth of food. She came to me to ask her to help apply for citizenship. At 18, she is still young, very innocent enough to believe that if she becomes a citizen, she will no longer have to live in her car. We don't have big cases, but we have the ordinary types of cases. Alhamdulillah. Khawla had a mother and a father, 5 sisters and brothers. Now all she has is a car. And it makes me sad and it bothers me, but it should bother all of us. Do you know what else should bother us? That we have all these huge masjids and Islamic centers across the United States, but how many of them reserve one room for emergency shelter for people like Khawla? So it doesn't shock me that 75% of Americans don't really trust us, or 45% support laws directly against us, because maybe we haven't done our homework. Maybe Allah won't change our condition until we change ourselves about the way we do business with each other in America. Those numbers could easily increase if we don't do something to change the situation for women like Khawla. She may be from Iraq, but she's also a victim of 9/11. Nothing I say here will change the past, but we will ruin the future by doing nothing about the present. So it's time to recalculate. We need to worry less about who's watching us, but we need to watch to see what's happening in our own communities, how we are empowering our youth, what is being experienced by our small children, what their eyes bear witness to even in their youth. They know that character is ultimately expressed by our actions. Your actions build libraries inside your child's brain, and the weight of your lack of action can bury the part of a child's heart that allows him or her to reason with compassion. A child naturally draws on his parents'